Hello, hello. Welcome, welcome. Welcome to On the Ground's 10th anniversary party. I'm so glad all of you were able to come out tonight. So, give yourselves a hand. It is not easy to give events, but it's important that we keep trying to create community events, create places where people come together, not online, not through Zoom, not through other types of platforms, but where we actually see each other and greet each other. So I thank each and every one of you for coming out tonight. Oh, no, you can just go around the other way and you can get some food and everything. Go ahead. There's a door in the back. Okay. All right. So, let me put my eyes on. All right, so I wanted to talk a little bit about the show. When we started On the Ground, and though most of you know that we broadcast on Pacifica Radio, and we broadcast at the local affiliate first here, WPFW. And when we started the show, one of the reasons why I started it is because there was very little coverage of social justice action on the street, right? So there would be rallies, there would be very important movements. At that time, the movement for Black Lives or Black Lives Matter was happening. We started the same year that Michael Brown was murdered in Ferguson, and that same year, Eric Garner was murdered in New York, and there were a flurry of these police murders around the country. Yet we and we also had a very vibrant movement here locally called DC to Ferguson, and Kamon is a veteran of that movement. He knows about it, and we didn't have any coverage of that. Things would be happening in the street. So my goal was to first have us cover the people's movements. If people are in the streets fighting for social justice, raising these issues, we wanted to cover them. So that's how we got started. And it's very important to know that not everything happens on the street, so we try to incorporate interviews with knowledgeable people like Gerald Horn and all the other specialists that we could gather who are on the left. The words have become so charged, so like progressive doesn't really mean anything anymore, so I'm not really inclined to use that word, but we wanted to find people knowledgeable about history, social justice, who would be able to be good commentators and not just rely on the kinds of talking heads that are acceptable to corporate media and the mainstream press. So that's just a little bit about the beginnings of the show. The other thing that we did differently is that we decided to be an archive for our work and not just rely on the platform at WPFW, because it could be very problematic. Maybe things would stay in the archive, maybe some things would be sent as podcasts, but not always. So we wanted to be an archive for people all over the world to know about the activism and activists in New York, in Washington, D.C. So we have a website that we started, and some of the images that you see behind me are the images that ran with each show, right? So we made a post for each show, and we put that up as not a stream at that point, but as an audio file that you could play. And so here, 10 years later, we have shows from those 10 years on that website. And a couple of years ago, we started a podcast, our own independent podcast, and that was allowed us to go on to platforms like Spotify, iHeartRadio, and other platforms to make them more accessible to people who don't listen to the radio. We're living in a world where fewer and fewer young people listen to the radio. So to reach those audiences, we were able to go to podcasts and to hopefully the next stop will be to go to video. There are a lot of media specialists in the room, like Sam Husseini. He knows about the media landscape today, and we don't want to be left behind if we just rely on radio when there are so many other ways that people are getting information, and we want to be able to have our information fill that space, because certainly CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, the Washington Post, New York Times, some of those places where I used to work, they're not doing it. They are not putting out the information about people's movements, about telling the truth, about what's even happening right now. So if you're listening to the show, you know that we've been covering the genocide in Gaza, and one of my old employers, the New York Times, even put out a memo saying that you couldn't say genocide, that you couldn't say ethnic cleansing, that you couldn't, they didn't even want you to say it was an occupation. And as far as I know, that is the UN recognized definition of Palestine. It is called occupied Palestine. So we're in a war for information and truth, and I just thank each and every one of you who's helped me in any way to maintain the platform. It's a labor of love. I get very little sleep on Thursday nights. It's, if I can sleep at all, and that's usually the case, but I don't get any sleep until Friday. So we appreciate every one of you, and I want to definitely take the time to call certain names. And Chantel James is here. She is one of our longtime contributors. She came on as an intern from American University, and she stayed with me, even though she's a big novelist now, and she has her own obligations and work and everything to do. I appreciate Chantel so much. And I don't want to forget, so when I look back at our last anniversary party, I said, man, I didn't even thank people. So Lydia Curtis, Thomas O'Rourke, Michelle Robertson, Environmental Justice Specialist, Michael Byfield, DJ Floyd Aaron, and also Lucy Murphy. We have some new people coming on board, and I'm really excited about that. If you know people who are interested in citizen journalism, if you know people who are interested in, if they run an organization and they want to learn to be their own media, I've told people many times now that if you are doing an event, you're doing an action, put it live on Facebook, put it live on Twitter, put it live on Instagram, do something. I mean, you have to have a certain amount of followers on Instagram, I think, to do a live stream. But if you are able to be your own media, that allows people like me to pick up what you're doing, because we can't be everywhere. Most of us have jobs or we have other things, but we're still trying to put out the best show each week that we can. So with that, I'm going to get started with our little program. I want to invite Lucy Murphy to come up and get us started in a song so we can all join in and be a part of it.
Well, I'm so glad I'm here. Yes, I'm so glad I'm here. Yes, I'm so glad I'm here with you today. Hallelujah. Well, I'm so glad I'm here. Yes, I'm so glad I'm here. Yes, I'm so glad I'm here with you today. Well, it's joy brought me here. Yes, I don't hear y'all. Well, it's joy brought me here. Yes, it's joy brought me here. Yes, it's joy Well, it's joy brought me here. Yes, it's joy brought me here. Yes, it's joy brought me here with you today. I'm gonna sing. I'm gonna sing while I'm here. Yes, I'll sing while I'm here. Yes, I'll sing while I'm here with you today. Hallelujah. Well, I'll sing while I'm here. Yes, I'll sing while I'm here. Yes, I'll sing while I'm here with you today. I'm so glad. Well, I'm so glad I'm here. Yes, I'm so glad I'm here. Yes, I'm so glad I'm here with you today. Hallelujah. Well, I'm so glad I'm here. Yes, I'm so glad I'm here. Yes, I'm so glad I'm here with you today. Don't clap anymore because my time is limited and I wanted to get a few things in. Tomorrow is Mother's Day, and while we don't endorse the sentimentality of pesticide roses or diabetes chocolate, our mothers who brought us here, and so I was looking at my Facebook page, and DM Jones posted a nice photo of his mother, and he said, I want all my friends to post a photo of your mother because that's how come you're here. And so this is Ruth Azalea Scott Murphy.
Yes.
And I want to, you know, the older I get, the more I appreciate my mother, who died in 2011 at 97 years old. Mom would allow me to not wash the dishes and not do other household chores if I was doing my homework. And that's because she was a high school dropout, and she didn't want me to be a high school dropout. So if I was doing my homework, I could get out of a lot of drudgery. And when I started going out to places like the New School of Afro-American Thought, she didn't say don't go, she went with me. And she enjoyed listening to the history and the black poetry and the culture that was emerging. So I want to really express my thank you to Ruth Azalea Scott Murphy, and I hope you all will think about the good things. I know you fought with your mom too, but you know she brought you some good things too. And I want to do another song with you because NATO is scheduled to meet here in Washington, D.C. in early June. And we need to give them a song. And it goes like this. We say NATO's got to go, got to go, got to go. We say NATO's got to go so the people can live in peace. We say NATO's got to go, got to go, got to go. We say NATO's got to go so the people can live in peace. From Kosovo to Afghanistan, to Libya and Ukraine, the bureaucrats of NATO bring endless war and pain. They say they want a victory, so they're sending in more arms. But nuclear Armageddon doesn't seem to raise alarm. We say NATO's got to go, got to go, got to go. We say NATO's got to go so the people can live in peace. Let's hear you.
We say NATO's got to go, got to go, got to go. We say NATO's got to go
Now.
so we can live in peace.
Raytheon and Lockheed make the weapons used to kill. NATO members buy them and the people pay the bill. We can't afford good housing. We can't afford health care. We can't afford clean water because NATO left us bare. We say NATO's got to go.
Got to go.
got to go. We say Negroes got to go.
So the people can live in harmony.
We say Negroes got to go. Got to go. Got to go. We say Negroes got to go. So people can live in peace.
Washington made NATO to enforce its global rule. Now it's bombing pipelines where allies once got fuel. NATO domination brings hunger, war, and fear. But there's cracks in the foundation, and NATO's end is near. Remember what happened at Jericho? The trumpets began to sound. Joshua commanded the people to shout, and the walls came tumbling down.
We say Negroes got to go. Got to go. Got to go. We say Negroes got to go.
So the people can live in peace. One more time.
We say Negroes got to go. Got to go. Got to go. We say Negroes got to go.
So the people can live in peace. Woo! Let's see our sister Esther.
Thank you. Thank you. I just remembered I needed to say a few things that I said earlier. Let's give Lucy another round of applause. Okay, so our gracious hosts here at Busboys, they are providing us soft drinks for free. So feel free to order a soft drink with your meal. If you want something else, then our server will get that for you. We have books for sale that are going to benefit the show, and we also have an art auction to benefit the show. So when you're up and walking around, you can take a look at those things. All right, so I would like to bring up, speaking of our beloved contributors, I'd like to bring up Chantel James to have words. Please, come on up. Come on up.
As we know, I'm vertically challenged. But I'm very grateful for the opportunity to have some words at our event, and that's because On the Ground is very special to me. Even though I only get my piece in maybe one time every 2 weeks, whatever, and it's 2 minutes long or whatever, this show still really means a whole lot to me, and it has meant a whole lot to me for quite a significant part of my life. And so I would like to be personal about the impact of On the Ground in my life and why I think it's important for me to be a part of this show. So I came to On the Ground when I was a master's student at American University, an evil institution, where I received a master's degree. And I did this program as part of my internship in philosophy and media or something like that. And this show at that time was very critical for me, and I chose to continue on this show past any obligation to get academic credit for it, because at that time in my life I was in a very dark stage of my life, and I have a severe mental illness. When I was first contributing to On the Ground, I was actually still hearing voices and having auditory hallucinations, and able to go out to these events and cover the show, and cover them for the show, and put them together, and clinging to my work for On the Ground as one of the things that gave me hope and one of the things that gave me meaning in my life, because I was contributing to something that had impact. And over the years, over the course of the show, I traveled all across the Metro DC area to libraries, to protests, to community colleges, high schools, everywhere, to have to go to all these little events to just show up and get some audio from these events and get it on the air for On the Ground. And I became very familiar with the Washington, D.C. area as a result of that. And so then fast forward, I now have a novel, and that's cool, that's awesome. But me being on the ground, on the ground is still part of that, because my support as a novelist comes from Black media. My support is not coming from these fancy publishing people. They don't care about me. The only people who care about me are Black media, including On the Ground. And I'm not quite finished, I don't think.
Go, Chantal, you got it.
This mental health month, take your time.
And I also feel like the impact of this show is vital, and it's vital right now because we're in a media crisis. Now that the Israeli genocide is at this stage, almost all of the mainstream media has completely invalidated itself.
Amen.
And we've also seen that, these corporate capitalist places are buying up all the major newspapers, firing all the journalists. All the journalists who are left are on the picket line because they're not getting paid. And it's like, and the local outlets are closing. The DCS is one example in our region, but that's happening all across the country. And On the Ground fits into this media landscape as a Black-produced leftist show in Washington, D.C. that is actually bringing vital knowledge that's filling gaps in the landscape. That's becoming more and more important now that people need to step up and do media because the media has failed us. And the last thing I would also like to say is that the note I would like to close on is that Black Palestinian solidarity has always been strong for decades. Yes. We've always recognized our struggles in each other. We've always been fighting with each other. Palestinians were training Black Lives Matter protesters. Right. Angela Davis was writing about Palestinian liberation. And now our Black-produced show coming out of Washington, D.C. is one of the media outlets that is doing the best on Palestine, and that is committed to that is committed to covering Palestine until Palestine is free. Yes. And that is what I would like to say. Yeah.
Today.
But you can. It's your party. You cry if you want to. It's your party.
Now I'd like to bring up some of our beloved community. I first met Bridget Roussan, not necessarily connected to the station, but through many of her works that she does in the community. One of the things she does is that she is, I think, one of the initiators of the Diversity Fund, where she sits on the board. And Diversity Fund was one of the first organizations to give us a little micro grant. We don't really have, obviously funders. We do have a Patreon, which I should plug while I'm here. Which allows people to give a monthly donation or once annually. But the Diversity Fund is supporting a lot of small grassroots organizations like On the Ground. And whether, it may have started with $2,000 or $3,000, and it's not anything you can live off of, but when you're trying to maintain a website, maintain a podcast, even to have be able to give a contributor money for a cab or the metro or whatever, or to compensate yourself somewhat for the hours that you are going to need to, you know, do whatever, all those things. And then there's social media, trying to, you know, do all that. So she is just a really valuable person, not just on the ground, but in the Washington, D.C. area. I remember it must have been the last electoral cycle. I was talking with a group of activists and they wanted to run somebody for mayor. I said, why don't we ask for Jet Rasan? And I think I said something to her. She looked at me like I was crazy. Like, no, are you crazy? No, I'm not running for mayor. But that's the high level of esteem that I place her, and her intellect, her passion for social justice. Jet Rasan, please come up and speak.
I love you too. Won't you celebrate with me what I have shaped into a kind of life? I had no model. Born in Babylon, both non-white and woman, what did I see to be except myself? I made it up. Here on this bridge between starshine and clay, my one hand holding tight my other hand. Come celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed. Y'all know Lucille Clifton from Baltimore, right? Right here, that kind of poetry. I think about Esther Iverem and the On the Ground show, because it is making sure that we are not going to be killed by the lie. We are going to know what we need to know. And so what I love about the On the Ground show is that it and its contributors are without fear, and truly they are without fear. It is so painful, as my niece Chantal alluded to watch some of the mainstream media and see what they're leaving out and what they're totally misrepresenting. But the On the Ground show we can count on for the truth. It is analytical and it is actionable. I love Dr. Horn's contributions to the show every time he is on, because we're going to get a sense of depth in terms of historical context and political education. We are going to know something we needed to know to understand how critical it is that we stand up for justice. So it's also very special to me because On the Ground show covers the local, the national, and the international. It connects the dots across geographies, across issues, across constituencies, across time periods. That is what makes it so special. It deals with fascism. I was watching an amazing forum online. It was a book talk by Haymarket Books. They've got a new history of Black anti-fascism out. And I was watching that the other night, and I thought about the On the Ground show. Like, we can regularly hear something about the F word on the On the Ground show, and I really do appreciate that, because there's so many ways in which we are in other media, in university courses, being denied exactly what we need to know to understand what's happening now, and that has happened before. So I am appreciating that. I think it is a testament to the need to recognize and oppose misogynoir, transphobia, homophobia, racism, and all kinds of gender injustice. I mean, you name it. And we just don't have to be afraid. And we don't have to be afraid to say that we believe in socialism, that we believe in liberation. And I really, I know a number of folks understand what it was like to grow up in a time where to be accused of of being anti-capitalist was, could mean your livelihood, your reputation, your life. And we are standing tall and making the case about the destruction of capitalism and imperialism, and On the Ground Show equips us to do that. So I really want to appreciate Esther. I do appreciate On the Ground Show as a grantee partner of the Diverse City Fund, which was founded in 2010 and started making grants in 2011. And I was telling Dr. Horn, we started out giving $45,000 twice a year in grants to local grassroots social justice work that is led by the global majority. And thanks to folks like Tom Blanton, who serves on our grant making team, and of course Chantal has also served documenting the grant making team in years past. We just gave away $650,000 in one round. All right? And we're very much appreciating the opportunities to do that, and to do that with On the Ground Show, which is without peer. It really is. And finally, I want to say, I want to, on a personal note, say thanks, because I had the amazing opportunity in November to donate a kidney. And I donated it in a paired exchange, and the beneficiary was Jacqueline Lukman, who is someone who has been interviewed on the Ground Show, and now she has her own show also on Fridays in the evening on WPFW. I mean, there's just nothing like the people in this room and the people who are telling the truths that need to be told. Thank you so much for doing that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Bridget. Next, we have a media maker in his own right. He is the founder, a co-founder, and troublemaker, Angry Black Man in Therapy. Come on, Freeman. He is also going to tell you about one of his newer efforts. So come on up, come on.
Got to raise the bar. Not vertically challenged. All right, let's give her a round of applause for all the hard I have been telling her, I didn't just start, she's a witness, I didn't just start saying this today, but this is my favorite program on WPFW. Followed closely by Garland Nixon, shout out to Garland. But I want to thank her personally. She's a friend, but I want to thank her personally because she is responsible for introducing me to the great Dr. Gerald Horn, the geopolitical towering figure. I listen to Dr. Horn more than I listen to my mom. And I really appreciate his point of view. It's refreshing. And the fact is that we are living in revolutionary times, and I want us to not be this old war is me. I think it's great that the corporate media has exposed who they are. I think it's great this system is showing it's all of its hypocrisy. I remember when I was a disgruntled postal worker, and I got fired for making anti-war statements. Check this out, to a congressman's wife, right? Oh. As apropos, because I'm running for Congress now, DC delegate, not voting. We'll get into that in a minute. But she said some slicks. I was a window clerk. I was a house nigger. I was not going to work out in the fields. Okay, I was in AC, heated, controlled environment. you know? And it was kind of like an on-the-ground type of experience, because to my left was an older black gentleman from Newark, New Jersey, who said the greatest night of his life was the rebellions of the MLK assassination. He would correct me when I said riots. He said, no, it was a rebellion, you know? And so he said it was the greatest night of his life, and he would read the Wall Street and do stock exchange, would talk to me, give me that type of education. On my other side was an older brother from Ireland, and his family was in the IRA. And he gave me books to read, you know, introduced me to Henry David Thoreau and Tolstoy and all these people. And he was the first person to correct me, because I called him white. He said, I am not white. I'm Irish. He said, that's America. You know. And so I got an education. So with that education, this Congressman White said something to me, this is right after 9/11, and she said something to the effect that I wish they would take all these Arabs and send them back to where they came from. I see you start talking gangster stuff. Boom, boom, boom. Yep. They always got to check the batteries before you get started. Bus boys got their own problem too. They get audited a lot. Can somebody grab some in the room, because I don't want the rest of the program to be like this, but I can take care from here. So she said that, and I had a moment. I could have pretended I did not hear what she said. Anything else with that? Completed the transaction, gone about it, right? But I know I come from a people who had to step off curbs, off the sidewalk, who had to swallow their tongue, had to bite their words, was fearful of what the repercussions would be if they said something. It reminded me of my great-grandfather, who built his house that still stands in North Kakalaki. And I was a child. Thank you, sir. I was a child. Try to calm down here. And my mother would care for him and clean up and what have you. And this particular day, she left me alone with him. And a white man came to the door. And I'm a child, so I don't remember who exactly. He had a utility belt, so gas company, water company, somebody, electric company, somebody. And he didn't say nothing crazy. He was, Mr. Lewis this, Mr. Lewis that. And I saw my great-grandfather, 6'4", 6'5", talking to this much younger, much smaller white man, and he started talking different that I had never heard him speak before. Yes, sir. No, sir. Yes, sir. And even as a child, I knew something was wrong with that. Of course, not at that moment, but as I got older, as I reflected on that. And I thought about my great-grandfather when she said that. And I felt the need of my ancestors to speak up. Yeah. And I did. And I said something to the effect, I said, ooh, you need to be careful. That sounds real racist. She said, I'm not racist. And I didn't say you was racist. I said, that sounds racist. It's like, kind of like go back to Africa. Oh, no, I would never say nothing like that. Black people love America. I went, whoa, cowboy. George Bush is president there. I said, look, who told you that? You know what I'm saying? Like, all black people don't love America. She said, you don't love America? And you work for the post office? I'm like, it wasn't part of my job description. I need to sell stamps and money orders. Would it be anything else? And I thought we was having a nice debate. It never got ugly. And then a couple of weeks later, I'm in the office, freezing. And ultimately, I got fired. And I ultimately lost everything I owned. Slowly, but everything I owned. Literally. And the last thing I had was in storage. I got behind on that and had to go and bid on an auction of my stuff. The only thing I was able to salvage is a painting that I commissioned the great Picasso. His name is Demonstration. He paints on stage all around the country. And it was a picture of Malcolm and Martin shaking hands. And I used it for the event we was doing called the Black Love Festival. I bidded on that. I got that painting. It's a huge painting. And now it sits in the lobby of my building. And I knew that once I retrieved that painting that I was going to be able to make it. The very next year, I spent the summer in Kenya for a leadership conference with the American Friends Service Committee. Paid for the summer. Now, do you think the post office gave me a leave of absence to go spend a summer of life-changing education in Kenya? No. So this was supposed to happen. But here's the gift. Once you lose everything, you fear nothing. Hello. Wow. And I want you to go to be fearless. Nina Simone said, if I could just be life without fear, one day of my life without fear. I want you guys to be fearless. I want to share my fearlessness with you. Now, my fearlessness is not just me speaking to you, talking bad and busboys, a friendly audience, preaching to the choir, but like Dick Gregory said, the choir needs practice. But I'm stepping to the plate. And so, as some of you know, I'm now challenging our 34-year incumbent, Eleanor Holmes Norton, for DC delegate in November. I'm doing it as respectfully as I can, throwing her flowers, giving her a retirement party, thanking for her years of service, you know. But I wouldn't let her drive my car. And if we are not able to say that some of our distinguished elders have now become gatekeepers. And as an artist, one of the things as an artist, you need to know when to get off stage. I know my time is running out. But you need to know when to get off the stage. And here's my problem with Congresswoman Eleanor Norton. The last time I went to her office, she called the police on us. Refused to speak to her constituents. Refusing to, because here's the thing. She went from a South Africa anti-apartheid activist to carrying water for apartheid Israel. Now, her mentor was also my mentor, Dorothy Irene Height. And Dorothy Irene Height led not one, but 2 delegations to South Africa. And you know what South Africa's position is on this issue. At the World Conference for Racism, ironically, also in 2001 when I got fired from the post office making anti-war statements to a congressman's wife, apropos. And who walked out of that conference? It's only 2 countries walked out of that conference because we just say you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. That's right. So that lets you know what Dorothy Irene Height politics and position was on this issue. So we can't reconcile this. So please don't look at me as the bad guy. I'm not disrespectful. I'm honoring her. I'm honoring the true tradition. See, people say, oh, she's with Snake. Stokely Carmichael's a snake. You know what Stokely Carmichael's comments was on Zionism? Now they want to tell you, oh, he's anti-Semitic to be anti-Zionist. They want to make it what? They want to make it a law, right? Yes. Let them. This is the system in its desperation to maintain itself, maintain the status quo. And I leave you with this. Many of us is familiar with the last speech of Martin Luther King, at least we should be, because I know they don't teach none of that in school no more. But we're not as familiar with his next to his last speech, which was delivered right here in Washington, D.C., March 31st, 1968. It was entitled, Remaining Awake During a Great Revolution. He goes on to say in that speech that far too often people find themselves living in periods of great social change, but yet they fail to develop the new ideas, the new mental responses that the new situation demands. They end up sleeping through a revolution. I submit to you that's the quintessential definition of stay woke. And that's why our enemies have turned that into a pejorative. So be very careful when you hear our skin folk and not necessarily our kinfolk repeating the words of our enemies as these pejoratives. Or you want to woke people. Yeah, you want them unconscious people? Wake up. And when you wake up, I want you to be fearless. And I want to share this quote from you with my birthday boy. My birthday is Monday. Everybody, when they tell me we're doing a campaign event on my birthday, I share with a great artist by the name of Stevie Wonder. Maybe you have heard of him. And this is what he had to say, and this is my gift to you and to all the people that's responsible for on the ground successfully being here for 10 years and for the next 10 years, and hopefully it'll be a nationally syndicated program in the next 10 years. But this is what Stevie Wonder had to say. This is my gift to you for your fearlessness. He says, life has meaning only in the struggle. Triumph or defeat is in the hands of the gods. So let us celebrate the struggle. That's Stevie Wonder. Let's celebrate the struggle. If anybody's a DC voter, come see me and sign our petition back here. I got t-shirts and posters. I hope y'all can grab one. But whatever you do something and be fearless.
Let's give Come On another hand.
Paul Parker is here now. We can start.
Okay, so how's everybody doing out there?
Yeah.
All right. So we are trying to keep us on schedule here. So there are still a few buffet items out if you haven't had a chance to eat. So I hope you've gotten some food. There's some vegan hors d'oeuvres out there. For those who might want some, and I think there's some more vegetables left. Okay, so we're going to move into the next part of our program now, and looking at the time, I would like to bring Gerald up before it's too much time goes by. So I want to talk about Gerald Horn being on the show. He has really helped me so much in terms of bringing a lot of information to the show that, you know, as a volunteer, as a person putting together a show without a lot of resources, he has always brought tremendous information and value to our discussions. Many people, you know, they come up to me and they say how much they appreciate the discussions with Gerald, him being on. He's such a knowledgeable person. This is, I think, now he's moving past 40 books, like maybe 45 or something like that. And every time he does a book, we try to talk about it on the show. And I know I learned so much, and I hear from our audience members how much they learn and how much it helps us to deconstruct and basically confront the misinformation and the disinformation that we get from corporate media and even from our education system, right? So whether it's talking about Haiti or Cuba or Texas or the real founding of this country, we have received a valuable graduate level education from Professor Gerald Horn. And so I want to bring him up now, and please give him a round of applause.
Viva Underground Show, viva!
Viva!
Viva Esther Iberum, viva!
Viva!
Viva Pacifica Radio, viva!
Viva!
Viva Camon Freeman, viva! Thank you for...
Raise the mic for him.
Oh, okay. I'll hold it. Thank you for inviting me here this evening. I'm certainly appreciative. I was instructed to talk about the Haitian Revolution, which I will do so, but I think I would be remiss if I failed to mention the fact that this country, people who are within walking distance of where we're sitting, are slowly but surely creeping towards what could amount to be World War III. I'm not only talking about the crisis in Gaza, Palestine, which we're all too familiar with, but I'm also talking about the tensions in the South China Sea, this alphabet soup of coalitions that Washington has been organizing, the Quad, the Squad, AUKUS, etc. It's apparent that U.S. imperialism feels that China is in the passing lane. I just saw in the paper today that Mr. Biden is about to put 100% tariffs on certain electric vehicles and other items that China is exporting. They're ratcheting up the pressure, they're ratcheting up the tension. And this also suggests why we need on the ground, because I'm afraid to say that you will not necessarily receive enlightenment on NPR, which is under fire from the right wing, and even from its own staff, believe it or not. You won't receive it certainly from the Amazon-owned Washington Post, which obviously has a material interest in perpetuating the status quo, if not turning the status quo backwards. So, once again, I am thankful and grateful for the labor on the ground. I'm thankful and grateful to you for supporting on the ground. And I'm thankful and grateful that I have an opportunity to spend a few seconds talking about the import of the Haitian Revolution, 1791 to 1804. One of the tragedies of the Haitian Revolution is that even those who have considered themselves to be radical have failed to acknowledge its profundity. Even those who say that they are in favor of workers' rights and workers' revolutions have failed to acknowledge the profundity and significance of a successful revolt of the unpaid sector of the working class, which seized power under difficult and adverse conditions, not least from the government headquartered right here in this town, despite the fact that many of us were weaned on the story that 1776 was somehow a great revolution. But if that were the case, one has to wonder why 1776 and the resultant United States of America did not stand in solidarity with 1804 and the Haitian Revolution, and instead has spent decades, now going on centuries, trying to destabilize the Haitian Revolution.
Tell the truth.
And shame the devil. And I think that one of the many tragedies, of the many tragedies of the Haitian Revolution, is the fact that it had to pay a kind of reparations to its former enslavers about 200 years ago, which crippled and handicapped the economy going forward. Recall that after Britain abolished slavery in Jamaica, Barbados, etc., or was forced to do so, circa 1834, that Britain then began to pay reparations to the former enslavers. Some of those payments were continuing into the 21st century, which gives you an idea of what Haiti had to go through and what Haiti is still going through as we speak. That is to say, it's on the verge of what potentially could be another disastrous, catastrophic external intervention, an intervention driven in no small measure by previous destabilization by the forces that now purport to be trying to rescue Haiti. I'm speaking of course, France and Canada and the United States and the so-called core group that is orchestrating this current intervention. I think that from our point of view, a double blow against the core group and all of its diabolical plans could be an alternative proposal that would put forward a mediation effort led by the Cuban government, because at once that would be a blow against the decades-long blockade embargo against the Cuban Revolution. Once again, Washington trying to strangle a revolution in this hemisphere. And at the same time, it would no doubt bolster Haiti, since Cuba already is supplying medical aid and other forms of aid that is attending to the basic healthcare needs of the Haitian working class, the Haitian peasantry, and the Haitian poor. So once again, let me conclude by saying I'm thankful to be a guest on the ground. I'm thankful that you folks have come out tonight to support On the Ground. And I am hopeful that I at least will be at this venue or a like venue a decade hence when we mark the 20th anniversary of the On the Ground program. Thank you.
Well, I know that there may be people who came to ask Gerald questions. I can come around with the microphone to you.
You want me to give him a chair so he can answer and respond to what he said?
Well, I think this is a chair here. He didn't want to sit. He didn't want to sit down. So, right.
No, if you ask a question, don't yeah, have to see.
Yeah. So, I'm surprised. This crowd doesn't have any questions. Okay. Okay, I think Michael has a question.
In the color section.
Yeah, the color section.
Yeah, Professor Horn, I made an observation the last maybe 2 or 3 months where an email blast, I think it's a financial investment company that's trying to get people to invest in things like gold and different kinds of AI stocks that where you can capitalize on it. What a lot of the things that have been asked or that they use to promote it are very militaristic. New laser weapons being produced by laboratories in the United States and given to Israel. All the types of weapons being used against against Russia by Ukraine. And we're supposed to invest in these because it's going to be a moneymaker. But what I don't understand is today we're getting this type of information, and it's the notion that it's accepted that this is a great investment. I'm going to ask you, where is this going? Why a regular person can get this type of information and promote in either World War III or our total destruction?
Well, it's a very difficult question. I will say this, that it gives me an opportunity to give a shout out to the students, including at George Washington University.
Yes.
Who have put their bodies on the line with regard to their university's investment in corporations that are assisting what the International Court of Justice calls a plausible case of genocide that's unfolding as we sit here in Gaza. Now, that would include, I'm sure, corporations like Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, the fault-ridden Boeing airliner, where you really have to buckle your seatbelt, otherwise you might find yourself flying out of a window. Going out of an open door. And with regard to gold, I mean, what can I say? I mean, it's no secret that China and India are buying up lots of gold. China in particular, because it's, for decades now, it's been buying U.S. Treasury bills, parking its money here to keep the United States afloat, so the United States in turn could buy goods exported from China. But with the downturn in relations, it's been reducing the size of its Treasury bills. Of course, you might have recalled that Secretary Yellen went to China just a few weeks ago with her begging bowl in hand, followed by Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, who upped the ante by going with a begging bowl in one hand and a knife in the other, threatening China because of its supposed undue support for Russia and Ukraine, but at the same time trying to encourage China to buy more treasury bills, which is in a disadvantageous position if you find you making threats to your banker. But in any case, as a result, you see this these substantial gold purchases. And, you know, I'm not an investment advisor, but it's apparent that because of this activity in the gold market, that the prices are going up, which may be a boon to South Africa, which is a major producer of gold. It may be a boon to Ghana, which is formerly the Gold Coast. So I'm not sure how to respond altogether to that question, but those are just some of my random thoughts.
This is Paul Humphrey. That's your mark right here. Go ahead.
Good evening. One of the questions I would like to ask of you is a policy that the United States used to undermine underdeveloped countries, and that is to destroy the agriculture industries in the country. I know in Haiti in 1980, the United States demanded that the Duvalier government kill every pig in the countryside. The result of that was that Port-au-Prince went from 600,000 people to over 3 million people in about 3 to 5 years, because it destroyed the economy of the countryside of Haiti, which then made Haiti, which was at one time a major exporter of food, a major importer of food. If you would go into showing that example being used in other countries with U.S. foreign policy.
Well, when you mentioned destroying the pigs, I was thinking you were going to talk about Cuba, because there have been credible stories about the biological warfare against the Cuban Revolution, which forced Cuba to have to liquidate a good deal of its pork industry, for example. I think that there are no better examples of a kind of warfare against the food stock of a country than what has befallen Cuba in recent years. But I have a question for you all. Perhaps somebody can answer this question. When I was talking about food, I began to think of the ABCD controllers of the food supply: Archer Daniels, Midland, Bungie, Cargill, and Dreyfus. And of course, speaking of Dreyfus, brings me to Julie Dreyfus, the actor, formerly of Veep, formerly of Seinfeld. And she and a number of actors petitioned the Film Academy. And in that petition, they mentioned that what they call the myth of Jewish people being white. And I was sort of struck by that, because I always thought that the idea that Jewish people were not considered to be part of the so-called white community was something coming out of Dixon. It was something coming out of the ultra-right. And Dreyfus, who of course is an heiress to that fortune, I don't think she's part of the ultra-right. And so I still haven't gotten a clear answer on what she meant by saying that, by associating herself with that particular idea. Blue Wolf, do you have any idea?
I'm afraid I can't help on that one. I'm sorry.
Anybody? Oh, well.
I'm sorry,
No, actually, I can offer a little something. And probably the last, so I had actually had that kind of conversation maybe when I was still at the Washington Post. There was an editor who was Jewish, and also in a conversation that very, very similar statement was made, that, well, no, this person is not white, they're Jewish. And so, okay, stage managing, you know. So I do know that there is that conversation had. I also had the same discussion, you know, like when I was working at a union. So, I mean, the Jewish people who came to Israel from Europe are European, right? They're considered Ashkenazi Jews, right? But then there's Sephardic Jews, right?
Mhm.
These are not from Europe, right? So I don't know the context in which, yeah.
Well, she was complaining because, the Muslim History Academy has just developed this museum. And the complaint was, and this is a complaint that you see in California generally, because California has made certain mandates with regard to teaching of ethnic studies. And many in the Jewish community feel that they should be under that mandate.
Ethnic studies.
Yes. And so disaggregating the Jewish community from the overall white community, I assume, was bolstering this idea that the Jewish community is not part of this overall so-called white community. But on the other hand, it sort of flies in the face of the history of settler colonialism in the United States of America.
Right.
Because Jewish people coming to the United States of America, although it was a struggle, they were ultimately incorporated into the so-called white community. And of course, even before the 20th century, as I pointed out on a number of occasions, if you look at the so-called Confederate States of America, the slave-owning forces who tried to overthrow the United States government, the number 2 and number 3 leader of the Confederates was Judah Benjamin of Louisiana, who was Jewish. Pro football fans in this audience, particularly Baltimore Ravens fans, there must be 1 or 2, might know that you just acquired Derrick Henry, perhaps the fastest and the biggest running back in the league. Where is he from? He's from Yulee, Florida. Yulee, Florida is named after a Jewish senator, slave-owning senator from the state of Florida, David Yulee, for example. So it reminds me of the complaints that you get from the so-called Mizrahi Jewish community, which we're making reference to, the Jewish community from Morocco to Iran, which, when they started flooding into Israel in the 1950s, they were making the point that the Jewish narrative is not necessarily the European narrative. That is to say, from the Inquisition to the Holocaust,
Right.
for example. And certainly, despite the Tree of Life, attack on the Tree of Life synagogue and other episodes of anti-Jewish fervor, you just can't equate the Jewish experience in North America with the Jewish experience in Europe. I mean, ordinarily, that seems, I thought that was just a commonsensical notion. And so when folks try to back away from what I consider to be a commonsensical notion of being a kind of detective and trying to figure out what's really behind this, what is really undergirding this? Is it because of some sort of nervousness or apprehension of where whiteness is going, and so people trying to bail out? Or is there something else involved? As I said, I haven't been able to figure out which is why
Well, I know, I'm thinking of two
wisdom
things.
crowd.
I'm thinking of two things, because like ethnic studies was something that your generation, people who were in college in the 60s fought for. Ethnic studies comes out of that struggle in the 60s. So for them to try to glom onto that is like ridiculous on that level. But I'm also thinking of the fact that the term Zionist has become toxic. You know, it didn't used to be that way, but this most recent, reemergence of the Palestinian struggle has really educated people about really the birth of Israel, how it came to be, and really what Zionism is. And so they're fiercely trying to maintain this equivocation, right, between, making Zionism equal with anti-Semitism. And so, I don't know if that has something to do with it, and just trying to, I don't know, yeah. So anyway,
You got another question?
oh, okay, Lou.
Ms. Scott? Oh, this guy.
You can just stand here, all right?
You don't have to stand up. You have to stand.
I just want to say thank you for as always, delivering the message to us about anti-imperialism and what the costs of it are in our own community here and around the world, fighting against imperialism. My question is, as always, the United States, as you said in your talk today, is stage managing events in Haiti, whether it's out in front or behind. Let's not forget that the U.S. kidnapped John Bertrand Aristide, placed he and his wife in an airplane and flew them to the Central African Republic. That speaks volumes. And I think my question is, can you trace for us the influence and the stage management of the U.S. about the events in Haiti recently, since President Moise was assassinated, and who was behind that? It appears it was people from Colombia. But are the U.S. assets from Colombia? And today, how is the U.S. Behind the events in Haiti, under the feet of the Haitian people, over their heads of Haitian people? Can you help us know better about that thing?
Well, before I get to that point, when you first started talking, you reminded me of the point I'm making in my book on the U.S. and Haitian Revolution, which is something that your publication, Covert Action Quarterly, probably needs to address, which is that one of the earliest successes, victories, so-called, of U.S. covert action took place in the 1840s. If you look at the island, which we refer to as Hispaniola, it's a rather small island with two countries, Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Of course, at one time, it was one country, it was Haiti. But as a part of the blow against the Haitian Revolution, which was seen as an emblem of abolition of slavery, which it was, which was seen as a crusader against slavery, which it was, which was seen either directly or indirectly stirring up the enslaved in North America and throughout the hemisphere. That was true. And so the attempt to split the island in two was an early victory of U.S. covert action. In fact, just like this, one of the reasons I'm in D.C. this month is that I'm working on a book on slavery in D.C., or black people in D.C., because a significant percentage, as you know, were free and poor. And with regard to that latter population, I'm going to argue that you can see the roots and origins of today's surveillance state with regard to how closely the free Negroes in D.C. were surveilled. Basically have to carry passports, and that way they preceded apartheid South Africa, having to register once they arrived in the city. And strikingly, with regard to covert action, with regard to the surveillance state, a good deal of it you can trace back to the efforts of the so-called slaveholders' republic headquartered in Washington, D.C. to keep a lid upon its most valued property, or those who were thought to be allied with its most valued property, speaking of the free Negro population, who were oftentimes scapegoated with regard to slave rebellions, even though some of them might not have had anything to do with it, to put it mildly. Now, fast forward to the 21st century and the tragic assassination of President Moise. The dust is still clear with regard to that tragedy. I'm sure you heard the story. At least it was reported in the New York Times. I'm not sure if I can credit the story, but they put out a story that suggested that his spouse has been implicated in his assassination because she was in the bed with him when he was killed. She was injured, but obviously not killed. There have been allegations that certain Haitian American businessmen in South Florida were implicated. Now, of course, we have to, like the artichoke, we have to keep pulling off the layers to get to the heart of the matter. And I expect and know that your publication will be part of that process, because it reminds me of another story. You might recall what happened a few years ago when the Ku Klux Klan was involved in an attempt to overthrow the government of Dominica in the Caribbean. It was barely thwarted. And of course, we all know what happened in 1983 with the U.S. invasion of Grenada. And so obviously the United States historically has kept a close eye on what it considers to be its backyard, that rather chauvinistic, overreaching term. And certainly with the memory of an elephant, U.S. imperialism has yet to forgive or forget what Haiti was able to accomplish by jeopardizing billions of dollars in property in enslaved Africans and driving a number of families in Dixie, from their point of view, into impoverishment, and therefore seeking retaliation to this very day.
Thank you, if you will.
Thank you for taking my question. I'm sure you're aware that there is a book out by a man named Aaron Lowenstein who has written something called The Palestine Laboratory. And he's updating and giving a comprehensive view of something that has been going on for decades, which is that one of the functions that Israel performs for the huge billions of dollars a year payout it has been getting is that it tests weapons that are produced by the U.S. on Palestinians. And it also develops its own weapons, and it markets them around the world as being battle tested, which means they've been used against Palestinians, and that is a big marketing plus. What I overheard a comment earlier this evening, and I wanted you to comment on it. Someone said that they believe that what's happening now with the devastation in Gaza is basically a kind of precursor, or it's a first step towards the imperialist powers wanting to recolonize the world. I would tend to think that World War I and World War II were basically it occurred because the imperialists had colonized the world and they needed to redivide the pot. The countries that became fascist, Italy and Germany in World War II, didn't have colonies, and that's why they were in trouble. But it seems, the way I would tend to look at the situation in Gaza is that they're testing the horrible devastation because that's what they're going to be using here at a time when you have rising sea levels, environmental collapse, the economy is not in good shape, and it's probably going to get worse in a competitive atmosphere. And so they want to know how do they handle mass urban uprisings. And they're testing things out, not only for themselves, but for the powers that be. And I just wondered if you could comment on that, on what is your take of the significance of the annihilation that they're visiting on people. Thank you very much.
There's something to this idea of using Gaza as a kind of mass experimentation with regard to weapons. We say the same thing for Ukraine, for example. You say the same thing for the Ukraine, for example, in terms of being sort of a laboratory. But I think one of the things we're going to have to keep an eye on is something I've been trying to stress, which is that there is a possibility of a deepening rift between Israel and the United States. I know that there are those who see the so-called pause with regard to U.S. sending heavy tonnage to Israel is somewhat theatrical, because you have to ask, well, what were they sending as of last Monday before they made the decision on Wednesday, for example. But at the same time, I mean, one does not have to be a strategist or an oracle to see that the United States would like to focus on China, would like to focus on the China-Russia relationship, and getting bogged down in Israel and suffering reputational damage as a result is not necessarily consistent with the overall strategic ambition of focusing on China, which has an economy that's advancing by leaps and bounds. And if U.S. imperialism is not careful, this Asian country, which already, by some measures, has the largest navy in the world, is already exploring what's called the dark side of the moon, is advancing with regard to green energy, quantum computing, etc. And so the window with regard to overthrowing the Chinese Communist Party, which is a proposal put forward in the current issue of Foreign Affairs by Mike Gallagher, recently departed from Congress. He was a leader of the so-called bipartisan Congressional Committee on the Chinese Communist Party, and mentioning that it's bipartisan suggests accurately that this is a policy of both major political parties, as to say, to see China as the major antagonist, whereas with regard to Israel, obviously there's a rift that's developing within the Democratic Party, as evidenced by the encampments, the student protests, even your own Senator Van Hollen has been complaining about U.S. aid to Israel. And so I think that I'm not sure where that's going to go, because at the same time, because of historic developments, the needs of settler colonialism, that is to say, thankfully the students have raised this question of settler colonialism in historic Palestine, which then opens the door to looking at settler colonialism right here in North America, which has been one of the defects of the U.S. left, not stressing that issue sufficiently. But obviously, one of the imperatives of settler colonialism historically in North America, as we suggested a moment or two ago by mentioning Judith Benjamin and David Yulee, was to welcome some in the Jewish community into the ruling class. And of course, if you look at Chaim Saban, the Hollywood billionaire mogul, Bill Ackman, the Persian capital, Steven Spielberg, I mean, the list is long. And it's difficult to see how the United States is going to reconcile perhaps a rift with Israel with the presence in the ruling class of these Zionist billionaires. I'm not sure how they're going to square that circle. But at the same time, you could say the same thing about China, which is that how are you going to destabilize the Chinese economy and the Chinese Communist Party when Tesla is heavily dependent upon Chinese workers and Chinese investments, Microsoft, Apple, KFC, Starbucks, the list is long. Are they going to have to take a haircut? Are they going to have to suffer losses? Or is that going to be too heavy a lift? And so the U.S. ruling elite has some very difficult challenges ahead. And I think that we can make their challenges even more problematic by increasing the street heat, by increasing our support to these courageous students at George Washington and elsewhere, because
Your own university, University of Houston.
yeah, right. Hey, in Texas, they don't play that. They tore down that encampment almost before it was constructed.
Did you have a question?
So anyway.
Okay, so we have, we're gonna, I think we have two more questions, and I just want to, hold on. Okay, so three
All right,
more.
thank you, Dr. Horn. I just have a question in terms of historical parallels. And I'm curious about what's not being reported much, and I heard you speak about it, that not only that there's a war on knowledge and art, you know, humanity. So they're killing journalists, they're killing artists, they're killing academics, and destroying cultural institutions and sacred sites and historic sites and museums and universities. Like there's no universities left, right, in Gaza. So what do you see as the impetus for that, and where else has that happened or is happening?
Well, I think the emphasis is clear. I mean, I think it was Jared Kushner, before the president's son-in-law, who talked about the beachfront property in Gaza. It's no secret that the Israeli authorities, who once were building settlements in Gaza before they were forced out, may have the diabolical wish to drive Palestinians into the Sinai Desert, for example, or have their U.S. ally pose as a humanitarian by accepting Palestinian refugees, another way to engage this question of depopulation. But it's not just in historic Palestine. In the current issue of the American Historical Review, which is the leading journal for historians, there's an article by Woody Holt, who is the son of the former desegregationist governor of Virginia, your neighbor, speaking of Linwood Holt. And the subtitle of the article is The War on Blind History. That is to say, librarians being threatened. He calls them anti-white guilt laws that are being passed, because you can't make little Jennifer and little Johnny feel guilty about slavery. So therefore you have to circumscribe the teaching of slavery, which is taking place in Florida, taking place in Texas. The war on the 1619 Project for Howard University's Nicole Hannah-Jones. The fact that at the Indiana University of Bloomington, now teachers have to present both sides of controversial equations. I guess they need to present, you have an anti-Nazi curriculum, you have to have a pro-Nazi curriculum. I guess that's what that means. At the University of Florida in Gainesville, the conservatives, under the leadership of the former Republican senator from Nebraska, Ben Sasse, who is now the president of that university, they're constructing an entire college called Hamilton College, which is going to be a citadel of so-called free enterprise thinking. I trust that the faculty there will have to do what faculty in other colleges do, which is publish and do research, but you never know. Maybe they'll just be paid propagandists. And so there are a number of ways to look at this. So I mean, you can look at it as is apparent as being rather frightening on the one hand, but on the other hand, you can turn the coin over and see it as a sign of insecurity, as a sign of weakness, as a sign of fright about what the truth holds, as the comedian Stephen Colbert once said, that there's this idea that truth has a progressive bias, for example, and so therefore you can't teach the truth because it has progressive bias. So you have to teach right-wing propaganda, for example, or try to destroy or fire or intimidate or frighten those who are not willing to toe the line. And in Holton's article, he talks about principals losing their job. And by the way, as we mentioned on the ground, it was quite heartening to see the heads of K-12 school districts dragged before Congress the other day stand up, unlike the president of Harvard, Columbia in particular, who folded like a cheap suit when it came to being interrogated by Congress. Of course, materially, as we pointed out, these Ivy League universities are heavily dependent upon the kindness and good favors of billionaires, and so therefore they have to toe the line. Not so much for K-12 school districts. even in Montgomery County, for example, right here in Maryland. So, once again, we have some very serious challenges. Obviously, you're up to the challenge because that's why you're here. And that's your presence gives myself and others the idea that we will overcome.
There you go.
Good afternoon, Gerald Horn. I am from Washington, D.C., and I want to thank you for writing a book about Washington, D.C. I boast that Washington, D.C. is the center of the African world, and while some people may argue that with me, we are fortunate to have a professor who lives here, who's originally from the Ivory Coast, who used to do regular seminars on Thomas Sankara to give us a good model of where we need to go. Because his name is Nyaka Lagoke,
Yes.
and he formed something called, out of these seminars, something called the Convention for Pan-Africanism and Progress. And through my membership with that, I was able to attend a prep conference for the 9th Pan-African Congress, which is scheduled to take place in Togo, of all places, in October. I recently went to Bamako, Mali, for this conference, saying Palestine needs her freedom, Palestine needs our love, and discovered that the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Togo had major support for Israel. Interesting. I would, since I'm going to this, I want your comments on Libya and Sudan.
All right.
Let him ask this question.
Thank you. Congratulations, Esther, on your...
Shine, brother. Shine, brother.
Get in the
Shine.
camera. Get in the camera.
Behind you.
It's okay.
It's right behind you. Oh, you want me to get?
Don't look that way. Look that way.
Just
What?
go ahead, Eric.
It's all
I'm ready
good,
for my
brother.
close-up. Congratulations, Esther, on your 10th anniversary. Dr. Horn, you might be aware, several members of the Black academic community, especially there's a president of a HBCU in Louisiana, is investing or buying to the argument put out by many Jewish activists that Black persons should be the chief defenders of Israel. I wanted to hear your comments.
Okay, so we have Lucy's comment, we have Eric's comment, and just because I want to, if you can fold into that some comments about the particular, maybe it's related to Eric's question, because we have the passage of the so-called Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. We have the crackdown on the students, legal crackdown on them, and obviously we're entering a new period of new McCarthyism, but we also have your comrades, the National Lawyers Guild, defending the students. So just kind of as part of that, give us some ideas about the legal landscape, the landscape for freedom of speech that we're entering right now, which seems pretty frightening.
Well, the landscape of freedom of speech in this country is very rocky, to put it mildly. And not only the so-called Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, which tends to equate anti-Zionism with anti-Jewish fervor, anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism, with penalties resulting therefrom, which is ignorant of history because we know that at least for a good deal of the 20th century, Zionism was not necessarily the major creed of a good deal of the Jewish American community. It mostly arises post-1967 in the midst of a Red Scare and a Cold War, where the Israelis had triumphed over Soviet allies, including Egypt, and therefore it was possible to marry a fervent U.S. patriotism with a closer unification of Israel, and you see that's when you have a takeoff of Zionism, where today there are many pro-Zionist elements who suggest that Zionism is the overwhelming creed of the Jewish community, and that's something I don't necessarily accept. But once again, I would caution many of the Zionist community about where this is heading. Because with regard to the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, so-called, you might have noticed that the ultra-right in Congress, led by Marjorie Taylor Greene and Mr. Gates of Florida, were opposed to this because they say it's going to hamper their ability to put forward the canard that Jewish people were responsible for the death of what they consider to be their Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, and this is going to create rifts at the highest level of U.S. society, because, of course, we know that historically, at least in recent decades, there's been a kind of Christian Zionism, although I'm sure you know that Christian Zionism is supporting Zionism to an extent like a noose supports a hanging man. It's not the kind of support that you want to welcome. So, obviously, tenure for people like myself is under assault. It's being circumscribed because they're wondering why the state should pay for a person like myself to do research and write books unmasking U.S. imperialism and slavery and neocolonialism. They said that doesn't make too much sense. And so you can expect a all-out assault on the professoriate, particularly now since you have faculty encampments. For example, at the New School in Manhattan. And of all the ominous signs with regard to these encampments, one of the most ominous comes out of Los Angeles at UCLA, where you might have noticed that so-called counter-protesters attacked the encampment, according to the New York Times, funded by the spouse of Jerry Seinfeld. Let's hope that that wounds his career. By the way, he happens to be of Syrian Jewish descent, for what that's worth. And that was a very dangerous signal that the police and the campus police would stand aside and allow these protesters to go at it with regard to attacking these poor students. And so these are very dangerous signs. Now, with regard to this HBCU, I thought you were going to mention that the students at Xavier, an HBCU in Louisiana, they objected to Lyndon Thomas Greenfield.
There you go.
Coming to speak. And on the New York Times website as we speak is an article about Morehouse College in Atlanta, where Mr. Biden is scheduled to speak. Now, the headline from the New York Times, I haven't read the article, is about how Morehouse has not been in the forefront of these protests, but I've read other articles that suggest that students were objecting to Biden.
I would like to speak to this. I'm an alumna of Spelman College. I'm an alumna of Spelman College and a granddaughter of alumni of Xavier University, and I would like to speak to this. Okay. Go ahead, Chantal. I would like to speak to this.
You don't have to. I can bring you your.
The reason I need to speak to this is because the New York Times this morning made a propagandistic attempt to manufacture the idea that Black Americans aren't the first people out there supporting Palestine. And they put out an article saying how HBCUs don't care about Palestine. That is so false. First of all, at every college that has an encampment, that has an HBCU nearby, HBCU students are part of that encampment. Second of all, including GW. Second of all, HBCU students are protesting on their campuses, and they are sometimes receiving pushback from their administration of their campuses. Third of all, HBCU are playing huge roles. Now, Ruha Benjamin graduated from Spelman a few years before me. Ruha Benjamin gave a famous speech did you hear about this? At Spelman College that galvanized the entire national movement for Palestine. But the New York Times thinks HBCUs don't do activism for Palestine. In closing, Xavier University, which is the alma mater of my maternal grandparents, as well as many members of my family, made the bold move to reject this token black lady that the United States has as its UN ambassador for a speaker because they had such objection to it. And are white schools doing that? No, they're not. So why is the New York Times saying that black schools don't care about Palestine? That's entirely false. Lastly, as a member of the Atlanta University Center community who went to school across the street from Morehouse College and has people who are alumni of Morehouse College as some of her best friends in life, I can tell you there's a huge opposition to the leadership of Morehouse College inviting Joe Biden to speak at Morehouse. There's a huge movement of people trying to A, stop him from speaking, and B, make a lot of fuss if he does manage to show up. So this is an example of the New York Times serving as a propagandistic outlet. It's trying to make Americans think black people in black schools don't care about Palestine. That's the complete opposite of reality. And that's what I would like to say.
Thank you for that intervention. Let me just close by saying that I trust, Lucy's still here, right?
Yes, you're right here.
Oh, okay. That you and your comrades are familiar with the unrest that's been taking place in Togo, the fact that father and son have been ruling the West African nation for almost 3 decades. In some ways, it mirrors Gabon, which, as you know, endured regime change as a result of the family dynasty being toppled in August of last year. And they've just changed the constitution to extend this dynastic rule. I'm not sure if it would be wise to raise that once you arrive there, but certainly before you arrive, it seems to me that would be a fair game to talk about the internal situation in Togo. Now, with regard, we all are familiar with what happened in Libya in terms of the NATO intervention, circa 2011, Gaddafi being executed on camera, the country descending into chaos, which is yet to emerge, becoming a kind of playground for external intervention. And we've tried to stress the rather unfortunate role of the United Arab Emirates, which is also playing a double game in Palestine, too, by the way. That is to say, rhetorical support for the Palestinians while having under the table dealings with the Israelis. They're much more overt with regard to their noxious role in that part of Africa, not least in the Sudan, where, as you know, there's this conflict between the military and a wing of the military, which is roughly the equivalent of the Navy SEALs, the Rapid Support Forces, the elite branch of the Sudanese military, with Egypt supporting the military, many of the Gulf Arab countries supporting the Rapid Support Forces. It's a humanitarian catastrophe. A good deal of the country descending into famine. Millions of internally displaced persons, millions of other refugees fleeing into neighboring Chad, which has its own problems. Just concluding an election where the apparent winner, Mr. Deby, has been accused of finagling with the ballot box, but in any case, it won't receive that much attention because he's willing to play ball with the North Atlantic powers, you see. But certainly Sudan merits our solidarity, and I take it that it will be on the agenda when this Pan-African Congress convenes. But in any case, thank you, Esther, for
Maybe
inviting.
a word about the role of the media in Libya and Sudan.
Corporate media, let's get it straight. On the ground is media.
Okay, the corporate media.
Well, I mean, obviously the corporate media has invaded itself in glory with regard to its coverage. I mean, acting as cheerleaders for the overthrow of Gaddafi, not paying sufficient attention to the chaos that's continued to this very day, paying attention only intermittently with regard to the credible stories of enslavement that are emerging from Libya, the stories about people losing their lives in the choppy waters of the Mediterranean as they're trying to escape to an uncertain fate as cheap laborers in Italy or Malta, for example. And with regard to Sudan, not enough context. Context being, for example, the previous regime in Sudan being strong-armed to support the so-called Abraham Accords of Mr. Trump, which involved a kind of de facto recognition of Israel, which obviously inflamed a good deal of the populace, and then being forced to pay a kind of reparations to alleged purported victims of terrorism launched from Sudanese shores. And I could go on in this vein, but I think your intelligent questions betray the fact that you know the answers.
Okay, so I want everyone to give Jared a hand, please. So we are going to turn up our music. We have books for sale, many of Gerald's books here. We even have Chantel's book here also. We have an art silent auction. We have they have refreshed our buffet. So if you did not get enough to eat, or you have yet to get some food, please help yourself and help us to continue to celebrate.
Please give Esther Avram and all those niggas the next possible around the show. And to another 10 years. And if you're a DC voter, please sign our petition back here. If you're a DC voter, please sign our petition back here. And if you want to support the campaign for Kimon Freeman, it's Freeman, #4congress.com, Freeman, #4congress.com. There's posters in the back. Please grab one on your way out. Put it in an auspicious place. And to the sister who reclaimed her time, I want to validate your point. Last year, look this up, an Israeli consul said the greatest threat to Israel wasn't Hamas, wasn't the defunding of arming Israel, it was young black people in America.
Oh, they did say that.
That's right. They're on record saying it. They talked about it. Okay, so let's continue to be a threat and be fearless. I'm so proud of this woman. Give her one more time. One more time.
Okay, so I wouldn't be a good. I hear someone in my ear, like telling me to be a better promotress. So also, in addition to checking out the books we have and the art auction, we do have, as I mentioned, a Patreon account that supports On the Ground, and that's Patreon /On the Ground Show. And you can sign up to be a monthly or yearly subscriber for as little as $3, but I'm encouraging everyone to at least do $10 to celebrate our 10th anniversary. And also the there was one other thing, but anyway, just keep that in mind. If you didn't check in, you came in late, you can check in the bag, and also don't leave without your gift bag. We have volunteers who spend their time putting together the bags for me, and I think a few people already left without their gifts. So
you have a listening audience who might not have listened to your show. Tell them your show and what time.
Oh, okay. So for the people watching on Instagram, we are On the Ground, Voices of Resistance from the Nation's Capital, and we're on WPFW Washington, D.C., Fridays at 10 a.m., but we're also on 25 other stations on the Pacifica Radio Network. You can also listen to our show as a podcast, and that's what I was going to do. Everyone who is a podcast listener, open up your phone, search, get your podcast app out, and search On the Ground with Esther Ivera, and subscribe. But you can also listen on Spotify, iHeartRadio, and the other apps that run podcasts. Okay, is that good? All right. Thank you. And I also want to thank our DJ, Tony Leon, and he's going to crank up a tune for us.
Yay, Tony!
Right